Welcome everyone to Cultivate Prana's Masterclass, where we share methods, techniques, and wisdom from the path and practice of yoga, which you can apply to master your health, relationships, and business. I am your host, Devendra Narayan, and my guest speaker today is Alex Tsuk. In his own words, Alex is a nice guy with the ice in ice written under parentheses, which I find really, really interesting. And I love that, the way that you introduce yourself. And he is a friend maker who loves making a difference in people's lives. Alex is the founder of BreathingCold Method, and his mission is to positively impact the lives of others by enabling them to live to their fullest potential. So today, I'll be talking to Alex about the BreathingCold Method. Welcome, Alex.
Namaste. Kyal hai?
Namaste. Sab acha hai. Thank you so much for joining. So, Alex, I have followed you for some time. I've known about your work, but this is the first time we are connected. I'm super excited that you have given the time to connect with the audience today. Since we don't know each other so well, I really love to understand, how does a guy who's born in France ends up in Bali? How did that happen?
I also lived 6 years in India, and
Oh, that's surprising. That's wonderful.
Yes, and I miss Mother India almost every day. There's something, once you've lived in India, part of my heart is in India and will always be there. So I do miss India very much. I lived 5 years in Laos, and I made 2 babies in Laos with my partner. And then we thought, for kids, we wanted to give them a different place to live, a place where we could really have a better environment for ourselves to nurture them and their growth. And Ubud came up as quite a nice idea. So that's really, we love the schooling system that was offered there, a little bit alternative, the yoga culture, the spiritual mindset. It's a really powerful place in the world and in the universe. So we thought that would be a good place. If we want to change the world, it's a good place to start from.
That's beautiful. I want to read something from your website and then ask you a question on that, because this is pertaining to your BreathingCold Method program. And it says that practitioners will experience a variety of breathing techniques with the intention to find your breath, with the emphasis on your breath. Would you elaborate on what do you mean by that? How does someone find his or her breath?
So your specific quote relates to the facilitator training. And in most facilitator trainings out there, you learn one specific method, one specific approach. And I find sometimes that people that come with one strong method will just push for their own method. And they would say, if you're into rebirthing, then that's it. That's the way to go, and that's the healing way. If you're into holotropic breathwork, then that's the way. And Buteyko and Wim Hof and Soma and all those methods are kind of claiming that, okay, there is something magical about their way, which actually, from my perspective, I find that what matters is to breathe, and in a conscious way. And as long as you breathe in a conscious way, I believe that really magic happens. As long as you create space and time for yourself, it doesn't really matter if you hold on an inhale, on an exhale, if you are doing through the mouth, through the nose. Yes, there are differences, and we can talk about them. But fundamentally, the act of consciously breathing is really what matters. And I found that for myself, allowing myself to create kind of my own method, to cherry pick on different modalities, allowed me to find myself. So beyond finding your breath, for me, it's really a way of liberating yourself from teachers and gurus and traditions and the way things should be done, in order to go to your truth and say, I like this, I don't like that, that resonates with me, oh, I like that approach. And coming with that critical thinking approach to the breath allows participants to really express themselves. And as you know, the key to a great session is safety. And one of the key conditions to be safe is for people to be themselves. And if people express themselves and are themselves, then all of a sudden they will do things in integrity. And for me, this is almost the most important part, because if you just repeat things that you've learned that not necessarily sit with you or you didn't apply them to yourself, then we will feel it. We are animals. We sense when things are not in integrity or not in line. So this is what I mean. And this is really my approach, which is just about exposing future facilitators to all the breath has to offer, so that after that they can go for one modality or the other. And you know what? It will evolve with time as they're going to explore themselves. You might want to go for something more like CO2 tolerance. People that do more fitness or free diving will appreciate that. And there are tangible physical and physiological benefits to doing that. And at other time, you will want to go for something more around emotional release, etc., etc. So I love the freedom that is allowed within the breath, rather than being directed in one specific set of practices.
And that's beautiful. And that's something that, I mean, I come from the pranayama world, right? And it's a mixture of so many different practices. And in essence, that this is really the yogic practice of breathing, which is allowing people to find their own breath. If they want to play with a few combinations of pranayamas, because everybody responds in a different way. So I really appreciate that you do that in your program, because as you said, you know, there are many lineages that have picked up one certain technique and then have built up on it. Nothing wrong with it, but giving everybody an experience of different type of breathing method and then allowing them freedom to find their breath, find their breathing method. I think that's a gap right now, which you're addressing with your program. So I appreciate that you bring that in.
Thank you. I mean, and everything comes from pranayama. So I think what we all those methods are kind of doing is, you know, aggregating different modalities. And what is fascinating is how much science is catching up. You know, now we are all acknowledging since I think 2018 the power of nitric oxide, and how nitric oxide is important to the body to optimize delivery of oxygen to the organs. And one way to do that is to accumulate this nitric oxide in a nasal cavity, whether yogis have been doing it through humming, and they didn't wait for the science to tell them how to do it. So intuitively, we don't know how and where, but they came up with all sorts of practices that are incredibly efficient. One of them I'm really interested in, which is not backed by science, is the idea that you cool your body with breathing through one nostril. Actually, you heat it up through the right and you cool it down through the left, with this idea of rebalancing the nervous system. This is still not completely backed by science, but I feel that we are catching up. We're coming to that point. And every time science is unraveling something, it is always confirming something that has been done by tradition for a long time. And I love how, from whether you take breath from a spiritual perspective or from a scientific perspective, it goes to the same. It arrives at the same point. And the highest practice in pranayama is kumbhaka, is breath hold. And again, now we come back to things that now are really cool. Things look like Wim Hof method, for instance. But of course, there is nothing new into all that. It's just repackaging things that have been known and used for a long time. So yeah, all fascinating.
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said, because I agree with you. There's no good peer-reviewed article on why the right nostril will heat you and the left one will cool you, or, you know, activate one side of the nervous system and versus the other side of the nervous system. So science is catching up to, I agree with you with all this. Talking about science, let's pick that up and let's get into cold exposure and breathing. Right? So explain to us, I think also I saw on your website something very interesting around, you're talking about temperature and energy dynamics. Would you elaborate a little bit on what is the importance of cold, and then we'll get to cold breathing eventually?
Yeah, so I am fascinated by the power of the ice, of the cold, the same way I'm absolutely amazed by the power of the breath, because they are incredible practices that allow us to go to the extreme of our physiology and experience different emotions and sensations in a conscious way. I can stress myself in the deepest way by just holding my breath. If I start holding my breath, you're going to see me go into a complete panic in a minute and a half. And I can do that consciously. So I can really put myself in a really deep state of stress. Now, the power of the breath and the power of the ice allow me to be fully present. And at the end of the day, I often call those practices meditation for dummies. And I use a funny word for that, but it's the idea that ultimately what we want is to be present with our emotions, present with what's going on. And it's a really hard thing to do because we're busy, we're putting so much information in our head, we've got things to do, places to go to. And I love the stillness that comes from getting in the ice, because you're about to die getting in the ice. That's the signal that the body is getting. This is really not a pleasant experience. And having a near-death experience is life-transforming. And there are tons of testimonials about how life-transforming those near-death experiences are. Well, the ice bath brings it to the next level because it's a conscious near-death experience. I'm going to put myself on the deepest level of stress, and I'm going to do that in exactly 2 minutes when I open my ice bath. How amazing is that? And really, there are absolutely, I could go on forever on what you can experience through that. You can experience not being comfortable and going to that edge. You can feel the resistance in your body, not wanting to do something. You can release traumas that are stored in the bodies. You know, when you shake, it's really a natural way of humans or all animals to release traumas that we have. You know, animals shake. Your dog, when he's moving from one state to the next, he's getting up, he's shaking, then he's going on. So we have that innate ability, but we don't do it. And the ice bath forces us to do it. It's a really incredible immune booster, which we need these days. It gets us to be more conscious of what's going on inside our bodies. So if you are struggling with your diet, the ice bath or the breath is a really great gateway because it gets you to be more conscious of yourself. And sometimes diets related issues are related to the mind and you're trying to compensate something with food. And I really could go on forever. But for me, there are both amazing modalities that are almost forced mindfulness. I don't care about you being a great meditator or yogi. You get into an ice bath, you go to the same place. And it is proven, scientifically measured, and it's easy. You know, you take a CO2, an oximeter to measure your oxygen saturation and your resting heart rate. If you do a few rounds of a certain protocol of breathing, your heart rate will drop lower than if you do twice the same amount of time in just meditation. You sit and you do nothing, or you breathe for half an hour, your heart rate is going to drop lower. So you can really hack your physiology in a way that is, as far as I know, you cannot compare that to any other practices. And it's universal. Everybody has access to it. It doesn't require mastery. It's not like asana or qigong or anything that requires, patience and mastery. No, just breathe, open your mouth or breathe through your nose or wherever you do it. And that's what I love about it. It's universal and accessible, and everyone can master their own breath and develop the intimate relationship with themselves through it. So I love your work and I love that you do podcasts, and we need to get these messages out there. Breathe, people, reconnect to your breath in one form or another, because if you want to be more conscious in your life, well, you've got that tool. It's called conscious breathing. You are already breathing unconsciously. You don't need me to tell you how to breathe. And that's why people often, I'm sure you experience the same, they make jokes about what we do. It says, I don't need you to teach me how to breathe. I know how to breathe, da, 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 da. But you breathe unconsciously. And if every time you breathe consciously, and again, I really stress the fact that it doesn't matter what kind of breathing you do. The only fact that you are breathing consciously will lead you to be more conscious in every aspect of your life. And that's what is, for me, so absolutely life transforming about it.
Mm. And one amazing thing about, I just realized this, what you said is finding the cold and the breathing together is whole another level of meditation and mindfulness, because you are in that very uncomfortable, that sympathetic flight or fight response, and yet you have to focus on the breath. Yes, you have to make that extra level of commitment to focus on your breathing, and feels like surviving. Now, there's a level of training that's required for this, because I know many people do this with untrained, maybe not much guidance before, and whenever it comes to cold exposure, there is a risk involved. So even people who are listening, Alex is trained and he trains people on it. There's specific temperatures that are being used of the water that people get into. But talk to us now a little bit about Wim Hof, of course, made the tumor meditation really famous, right? Because that's what it is. It's a tumor breathing, this ancient Tibetan form of breathing method that allows you to heal. And there's been research, and Howard professor went in, I think in 80s, and did one of the first studies on body temperature increase with tumor meditation. And Wim, credit to Wim, because he made this really a household technique, right? Everybody knows about it. Walk us through how breathing cold is similar or different to Tumo and Wim's method.
Yes, thank you for that question. So I twisted the Wim Hof method. I modified it a little bit with the support of an inspiration of Dr. Mark Cohen, who toured with Wim for many years and was basically the doctor explaining the science behind the Wim Hof method. So he really allowed me to really understand the benefits of each moment of the breathing method or the tumor method. And then after that, with some modifications to really enhance it. So let me break it down for you. It starts with, in the Wim Hof method, 30 to 40 breath. And Wim would say, it doesn't matter how you breathe, just breathe. Now, here is the thing. First of all, you want it to be connected breath. And that's a really important part of breathwork, is the idea of bringing energy back into the body, that prana that is moving through the body. So having this non-interrupted breath is very important, because when you're stressed, when you're scared, when there is an event, you interrupt your breath. So allowing you for a certain amount of time to just breathing without interruption is very important. So it's the most important, number one. Number two, when you breathe deeply, specifically with the mouth, which is the one I encourage to, you will reduce a lot of CO2, because every time I exhale CO2. So my CO2 level is slowly dropping as I'm forcing my exhale. As a result, the CO2 binding the oxygen to the hemoglobin and allowing, with the Bohr effect, the distribution of oxygen to the organs, I have less oxygen going to my organs. That's why people will report having tingling sensations, headache, dizziness, lightheaded. This is a lack of oxygen being distributed. Now, it is not a really nice thing to do unless you do it consciously. Because when you do it consciously, all of a sudden, there is not enough oxygen going to the brain, and the brain has to decide who gets it. So it, of course, goes to the limbic brain, the fundamental part of the brain, but it maybe doesn't need to bring it to the prefrontal cortex, where we store inhibitions and we think about the future and the past. We don't need that. We can survive without that. So doing this for actually 5 minutes, which is what I do, and I recommend to do, allows you to really get into that state. I call it microdosing. You don't get into complete altered state of consciousness like with something called holotropic breathwork, but you get a mild sense of, oh my God, so you get really present. You might start to release a little bit. You might start to connect to your true self. So this is why I like to do it for 5 minutes, a bit longer than Wim I like to do. Followed by a breath hold for exactly like Wim Hof on the relax exhale. So we would just relax, we just hold the breath. Now, because I have reduced my CO2 so much, it's going to take a while for the CO2 to reach a point where I get triggered to breathe, because the urge to breathe is triggered by the CO2 level. So this is a very important part, because as a result, I can hold my breath. And that's why we hold our breath for so long, because we've reduced our CO2 level. But what's fascinating is not so much what's happening with the CO2, but it allows the oxygen to drop. And it takes a while before your oxygen starts dropping. So it's nice to hold your breath for 2-3 minutes, because then the oxygen gets to drop. And there are tangible now studies highlighting the benefits on stem cells, on rejuvenation of cells, of lowering consciously your oxygen level. So now we are really tapping into the deepest part of our physiology when we can do that. And we do it for a few rounds. So it's a really cleansing practice, a little bit like fasting is to food. Holding the breath is kind of the same at a cellular level to the cells. So we are decluttering our cells, and that's already backed by science, and that's pretty cool. And we have to thank Wim for all the studies that are being made thanks to him and with him. Followed something that has been kind of, I don't know if it's from him, but I saw him in his practice, Dr. Joe Dispenza, which he calls the shoot, which is basically through the nose, having a deep inhale, moving from the bottom of the vagus nerve, the perineum, all the way to the top, which is the pineal gland, and you really move energy up. And it goes like that. You inhale, you will squeeze your perineum, your abs, your lower back, your butt. You can clench your fist. The tongue can go at the roof of the mouth, the eyes up. So you really, in Kundalini, you have that. In many practices, you have it where you really move energy up. It's also a wonderful way to release emotions. We store a lot of things in our bodies. We store issues in our tissues. It's often in the belly and in the basin. So we kind of move that up, followed by a breath hold at the top. And that's a second twist. I like to prolong a little bit this breath hold, a bit longer than Wim, because it's kind of a bliss state. So I must be clear that there is no scientifically proof that you release DMT with breathing. It has not been proven, but it's usually what would be coined or called the DMT breath, because you are getting into a similar state that you would get on some form of LSD or ayahuasca. But again, this has not been backed because of, it's not an easy thing to prove, but you have similar stories being shared. And then you release through the teeth, which, as you know, prolongs the exhale, so as a parasympathetic activation. And that gets you into a really relaxed state. So you're going to do after that, I recommend to do 2 minutes of nothingness. And it's almost, if you have to take away one thing from this talk, but if you do the Wim Hof method, just add space between 2 rounds, because euphoria follows dysphoria. I have stressed my system with these different breathing sequences, and now I'm going to do nothing. And I'm going to trigger the production of hormones of happiness. So I always say with this technique, you are happy, but you are happy not because of anything that happened from the outside. I am happy because I triggered the hormones of happiness with this idea of eustress that follows distress. And that's exactly what's going on at the hormonal level. So you do a few rounds of that, you're centered, you process your emotions, you will sleep better, because often we don't sleep well because we haven't processed emotions during the day. So there is tons of benefits, whether you do it in the morning to energize, or you do it in the evening, breathing more through the nose to calm down the nervous system. But it's a nice cleansing practice of emotions and at the same time of all your cells. So that's in a nutshell what I recommend and what I facilitate. But again, as I said at the beginning, this is my offering. This is what I coined, but I don't push for that method particularly. No one is able to tell you whether mouth breathing or nose breathing is better. And you can look at it it's always a trade-off. If you breathe through the nose, you will never release emotions. You don't release emotions breathing through the nose. No, it's not true. It's always when you make love, when you cry, when you are laughing, it's always through the mouth. So if you want to have that, it's mouth breathing. But if you want to release bacteria that are stored in the body on the inhale, you need to exhale through the nose. So, it's all about awareness of all those practices rather than telling you this is how you should do it, which I think is something that we hear a little bit too much these days.
Couple of clarification points there, Alex. So you're doing this breathing while you are in a cold tub?
No.
Is there where the cold exposure happens? So breathing happens first, then the cold exposure happens later.
For safety reasons, it's very important to stress that this needs to be done on a yoga mat, ideally, or sitting in a safe environment, because you could pass out easily. When you play with CO2 level, the CO2 level being so low, you're not going to get the signal that your oxygen is too low, and you could pass out so that you can breathe automatically. So this is, a shallow blackout for free divers would know that. So you could really, really be mindful of that. So this is not a breathing practice to do when you go in the ice at all. When you go in the ice, first of all, and that's also just to stay with the differences from Wim Hof, when you go in the ice, my personal take is to not try to control anything. We spend enough of our time controlling everything. So when I get in the ice and all of a sudden I'm overwhelmed with fear and anxiety and am I going to die, I take that opportunity to just open my mouth and let it out without trying to control. Because it's a rare opportunity to let go. It's a rare opportunity to not control your emotions. And I love the trigger of the fear to sometimes I'm going to be raging, laughing, screaming. I don't know what's in me, but when I get in the ice, it comes out. And I don't miss this moment. Often when I demonstrate ice baths, I have a uniform of Superman. And I tell people with my hands on my hips, I'm going to show you how to take an ice bath like Superman. And everybody's expecting this guy who's controlling his emotions. Nothing's coming out because it's a narrative that we have in our society about what is Superman. But I think we need to change that narrative. For me, Superman is someone who is connected to his emotions, who is allowing himself to be vulnerable and happy and angry and all the range of emotions to come out. And that's one of the things we have to unlearn from our culture and the way we've been raised. So the ice bath is a great trigger for that. Now, after that, you want to calm down the nervous system. And that's where you switch to nose breathing. You prolong your exhale. You focus on methods like box breathing, when your inhale equals your breath hold, equals your exhale, equals your breath hold on empty lungs. So you focus on some kind of a breathing that will help you reconnect with yourself. And that's where it's mind over body. My body is going to be looking everywhere. And my mind can come in saying, you're safe. You could get out. So let's do something about it. And the breath is the wedge. The breath is the tool that can come in between my fear reaction and my response. And I always have that ability to reconnect to my breath. And then very quickly, with any form of breathing techniques, I of course recommend visualization. This is such an important part of any breathing practice. And visualization is now proven to have such impact on people's life. If you can see it, you can live it. And it's true for absolutely everything, whether it's athletes have doing it for forever, but, entrepreneurs, they all have this vision and the budget and the business plan. If you don't have that, we've materialized that in our everyday life. So it's true for ourselves, I am now the person I want to be. My emotions now that I carry are the emotions of the person I want to be. I create my reality like that. So it's very, very important part of it. So I can do that also in the eyes. Of course, for people who are really doing a more advanced level, you really want to engage the intercostal muscles by doing some actually upper chest, deep breathing, but engaging the upper chest. In yoga, you really engage in the diaphragm and low belly breathing, where you want to engage all those muscles that are these intercostal muscles that are so important to heat up the body. And it's really this not it's getting into a horizontal breathing rather than a vertical breathing. And engaging in this horizontal breathing allows you to come to that state of, oh my God. So really working on this flexibility of the rib cage is a wonderful, and you're really in your body, it's a really nice embodied practice of it. So, and once you've done that for a bit, then you can just stop doing anything and just close your eyes and just go within and feel your organs and have that connection. And again, you're going to be meditating. If you're a meditator, you know how hard it is to do 5 minutes uninterrupted, no thoughts meditation, no thoughts for 5 minutes is pretty advanced practice. Well, in the ice, you get it. You don't have a choice. And that's what's amazing about it. If you do a breath hold, that's it. You're going to be there as well because you have to survive. So every time you put yourself in this survival mode, gets you out of your head. And that's absolutely incredible.
And the amazing things about these kind of breath holding is also is that it's a conscious way to hold breath. Earlier you said when we hold emotions, we hold our breath, right? I mean, somebody's cutting off on the highway and we almost hold our breath. But that's a sort of a knee-jerk reaction. And these particular techniques, like Kumbhaka, we talk about the ultimate practice in pranayama. It's a conscious ultimate practice of holding that breath. And that allows you to center. That's one more way of meditation. I want to understand, what is your take on, because in Wim Hof's method, we are holding the breath after we are exhaling. In your technique, there's two holds. One is after you exhale, and secondly, when you're doing that pull, when we are probably moving that cerebrospinal fluid up towards the ventral cavity and then up towards the brain and its channels. What do you think is happening in the breath holding after the exhale, and how is it different from breath holding after the inhale?
So I touched it a little bit before. But it's my 2 cents is always play with yourself, experiment with it. Don't take anything I would say or you would read and for granted, and just play with it and see what works for you. Some people will be much more comfortable on breath hold on the inhale, others on the exhale. Sometimes I do a breath hold on the exhale. I take an inhale, an exhale, and do a second breath hold on the exhale. So it's just to be really playful with it. So from a physiological perspective, what's happening when I'm exhaling, I'm starting with a lower CO2 level. CO2 goes out, so my CO2 level. And it's really the idea of playing with your CO2 level that is there. When you are taking your breath hold on the inhale, you really don't have that play with the CO2. You start with the CO2 level that is already higher. So it is playing. It's a little bit playing with it and see what resonates with people. And again, you've got, from a physiological perspective, with the interest of dropping your oxygen level consciously, it's more interesting to do your breath hold after the exhale. And that's the one that is scientifically studied. That's the one you have in Buteiko. You have, in everything that is around breath hold, and CO2 tolerance from a fitness perspective is always after an exhale. You also have a difference of pressure. If I take a full inhale, I can feel really deep pressure. It's really hard for me to hold my breath but if I take a relax exhale. If I do a full exhale, again, there's so much difference of pressure between inside and outside. I cannot hold more than a few seconds. But having a relaxed inhale, or even better, a relaxed exhale, you have got less pressure in your lungs, and you're going to be able to just hold that for quite a long time in a very relaxed way. And if you study free diving, what they will tell you is the ultimate way of improving your dive is relaxation. So it's not so much about how, of course, you need to train your lungs, you need practice, but what you are training is your nervous system as well. Learning to be comfortably uncomfortable, and learning to be comfortably uncomfortable when you are struggling to hold your breath is the biggest stressor in life. There is nothing more stressful than a breath hold. And that's cool, because then and that's very, very important. At a physiological perspective, your nervous system is a very simple machine. So whether you have a lion entering the room, an email from someone which is not pleasant, or you do a breath hold, is the same. So when I train myself to deal with a long breath hold, or if I deal with being in an ice bath, what I'm doing is I'm prepping myself to be able to respond differently when I receive a bad email, when I have to do something I don't want to do. And that's really what it's all about. Who cares about holding their breath? Who cares about going into an ice bath? You know, there is no reason to do that, but it's training you for life practices, because stress is a really important part of life. And we need to adapt to it. We need to be able to embrace it. And when you do that, the science is clear. Then your relation to stress will define your longevity, will have a deep impact on your relationships, on all aspects of your life. So it's pretty life essential what we are facilitating, my friend. And again, doesn't really matter from which angle you take it. I was speaking to a really nice breathwork facilitator yesterday, and he was using the Alan from Breath Guru, and he was sharing the idea of having a diamond. You know, it doesn't matter from which face you take it. At the end, it's a diamond. And I think that's what it is with the breath. And I love that image for it.
This is a wonderful conversation. I want to ask you one last question, because something caught my attention, which I didn't think about, but you brought something really interesting. One of the most exciting areas, I think, in breathwork research, and I think altered states of consciousness, is how does something like breathing, actually take you to that altered states of consciousness? And you spoke quite elegantly about the CO2 being depleted out of the body as you are breathing with the connected breaths. And then you mentioned something about the oxygenation in the brain, which is a very exciting area. If we can still connect the mind and brain together, or at least for this next question, I'm going to combine it. And you said something about something in the regards that the prefrontal cortex is getting less blood versus the limbic brain, if I can recollect. So do you think that's, maybe project a little bit, do you think that's what's responsible, or at least partly responsible, for these really altered states of realities or consciousness, whatever you want to call it? Because there's some very deep things that happen even with that one round of 5-minute breathing. You have any thoughts around that?
Absolutely. And it's, if you go back to the old text, Hebrew, in Latin, in Greek, there is one word for breath and spirit. And soul, it's all the same word, and spirit is breath. So really, it's where we are touching now. And that's where I love, I really talk a lot about science, because science makes people safe. They make you feel trust. Okay, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. But really what matters, and it's really a very important part of how, when I facilitate, is I tell you all that so you feel safe. Now you can let go of your beliefs, you can let go of the resistance, and you can let the body have its own experience. And that's why I have this very science approach, because really what I want you to do is let go of the resistance. Because very often people will not go really deep because just the mind doesn't let them go there. Or the body's happy with the story they've been telling themselves about themselves. And really what's going on when you are entering the breath and you do these practices, well, you are going to create this kind of space within yourself that is so needed, and so your body's longing for that. But at the same time, it might mean you're going to reject everything you've believed about yourself, everything you've believed about the reality you live in, because all you believe is a story. That's all it is. There is nothing real about the life you live. It's just a projection. And you can, I also facilitate authentic relating. And that's, for me, is a very essential part of the facilitation, because you are living one story, I'm living another story. But it's not real, it's not the reality, it's just a perspective on it. And when you are entering this, I don't know the right word for it. I don't like the word altered state of consciousness. You are entering consciousness. I think before you were we are in an altered state of consciousness right now, if you ask me. And when you are doing that, you are entering consciousness. Forget about altered state, you're entering consciousness. And then this means going to truth. Who are you if you're not a breathwork facilitator, a man from this origin, living in this country, and a father and a husband, and all these roles and all these titles, all the things that you define yourself when you speak about yourself? Who are you when you remove it all? And you get there. So yes, I told you it's really about from a physiological perspective, not allowing enough oxygen to some parts of the brain. And specifically, the prefrontal is the part where we have the center of our inhibition. Kids are not happy. You hear it right now. It comes out. They don't have this part developed yet. But when we grow up, we develop it, and then we don't want to be inappropriate anymore because we want to be accepted by the group. So I'm going to behave like I'm expected to behave. In this conversation, there is some kind of expectation of what should be doing. So I'm not going to tell you what's really going on because, oh my God, this is going to be a really bad interview. So I'm delivering something that is expected from me in the container. And we have this all the time, container of my family, container of my friendships. And I always say in my sessions, whenever someone starts a sentence by saying, sorry, I know something good is coming. Because we tend to apologize when we speak our truth. If I speak my truth, maybe I'm going to be rejected by that people in that context. And I know that it's never the case. And every time someone speaks their truth and they start releasing and they start to be human, we connect at a deeper level, at the heart level. And that's where magic truly happens. And we love those emotional moments. This is what makes us really, truly human. Well, the breath and allowing us through these practices of open mouth, usually, but also nose, but connected breath, allow us to somehow access that state where, you know what, I don't care anymore. And we start releasing. And sometimes people will tell me, and very often they will tell me, I don't know. So it doesn't mean you need to understand what was going on. You need to see how the body has its own intelligence. And it knows what's going on, what needs to be released. And that's where we enter more the spiritual ground, where things are not completely clear, but we need to accept that not everything in this world we can name and we can understand. There is so much that is beyond our understanding. And we need to just accept it. We need to take a leap of faith. We need to believe. And unfortunately, spirituality being often associated with religion, it has a bad reputation in our societies, where if I start talking about my religion, it implies that I'm superior to your religion and I'm going to try to sell you something. And I'm trying to and that's just, it's another story. And it's a lot of conditioning going around the world. But the essence of the message of all those religions is wonderful and it's beautiful. And it's often really the same, really. And so that's all we get to access when we are not interrupting the breath anymore, when we are pausing, when we are creating space to just breathe, to just be ourselves, to stop doing. And that's all we need to realize that, oh my God, I have everything I need. I don't need to heal anymore. I don't need to compensate by making more money, by getting more love, by whatever it is that we're constantly searching or trying to acquire. We realize, oh my God, I can breathe. I have my legs, my whatever it is that we can reconnect to what we already have and be in the here and now. We get to tap into it. And if you can do that every morning, it changes your day. If you can do it every evening, it changes your dreams, it changes your night, because there is an amazing science of sleep that needs to be taught to kids and everyone, because sleep is usually a decluttering of unresolved emotions. But if you can resolve those emotions before you enter sleep, then all of a sudden sleep is the most incredible creative state, and there's tons of science supporting it all. So really, we're focused on the wrong things. We're focused on fitness, we're focused on diet, and it's almost like, okay, this is it. But sleep is your number one health practice, and developing a great, and the science is what I'm saying. You can Google it. It's like you can. It's way more important. And how you eat is more important than what you eat. If you are eating but you're stressed, you're not going to digest your food. And I don't care if it's plant-based or carnivore diet or whatever it is that you claim is the best diet, you're just gonna it's not going to sit well. But if you relax your nervous system, if you time better your meals, if you, all of a sudden you will receive the nutrients from it. But it's energetical, not only. And that's what people need to accept, that it's a lot of energy going on with what we do. So setting intentions in all we do, including what we put in our bodies, and what we put in our minds is so important. We need to be really super strict on what we put in our minds, because this is really important hygiene. And unfortunately, we tend to look for the wrong source of information, the wrong source of food. And I always say the number one health metric look is joy. Someone who is joyful is healthy. So if you aim at that, and it changes your relation, because the rest comes into place naturally. You don't have to seek it even more, because I'm seeking joy. I'm seeking joy. Is it something that is going to make me joyful? And having that mental habit of really looking for that, you become to a kid again. And I always say in my trainings, I'm not here to teach you anything. Hopefully, at the end, you will have unlearned a lot. And that's probably the most important. Thank you for listening.
And that's a perfect segue into our part. And I can continue to talk to you for hours. This is an information and wisdom rich interview. So I appreciate you and I'm grateful for you, Alex. But tell our audience about your trainings and where can they find you?
Thank you for asking. Well, I offer free trainings once a month. So I love to share. I'm also creating a lot of content that I put out there. I have online course that I'm finalizing, which will be a very bringing science and spirituality together, and tons of really practical tips for everyday life, always related to the breath. So it's going to be a essential, fundamental. I call it fall in love with the breath, because I believe that when you're in love with your breath, you're in love in every moment of your life. So there's that. I do longer trainings once a month for 2.5 days online, and also in person in Ubud, where I live. And mainly what I love to do is facilitator training. So I have 6 months programs where, and I don't give the certification to everyone. So that's also specific to this. If you're not offering a safe container, you will not be certified. And it's not coming from me being an authority, but more my responsibility as a breathwork facilitator to make sure that people are bringing safe protocols with that. And we touch on breathwork, ice baths, and authentic relating, which we haven't had time to talk about, but really the art of being human and how we can connect and help people connect at a deeper level with themselves, the breath and the eyes, but also with others. How can you be a better partner, a better husband, a better father, a better friend? And all these is things that we haven't been taught. And with some tools and techniques and protocols and modalities, it really changes all aspects of our lives. And for me, I call breathwork and ice bath prep work. The real work starts after. Once you've got this connection to self, now we can start. And it's absolutely magical.
And so where is all this information available? What's your website?
Yes. So on Instagram, BreathingCold Bali, on Facebook, BreathingCold, and my website is breathingcoldbali.com. And on my Instagram, you'll find a link tree with tons of podcasts in different languages. And yeah, it's all out there, my friend. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much, Alex. I really enjoyed it. Very information and wisdom rich interview. And I appreciate everything that you do for the worldwide community and the growing worldwide community of BreathingCold Method. Thank you.
But tell us about, before we leave, tell us about where to find about you and what you offer.
Well, you can, my audience knows this, but you can find me at cultivateprana.com or thebreathclass.com. And we'll do another interview of what that's all about. But so much gratitude for you, brother. And I hope to meet you sometime. So I'm sure our paths will cross and we'll get to connect over breath live.
Yes. And we need to do a part 2 when we change role, because I also love to get people exposed to all the breath has to offer, bringing different people. So people watch the second part when you're going to be tell us all about your practice, your philosophy, and what you bring to the world.
Absolutely. Much love and light to you, brother, and take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Namaste.